first someone in my office was like, the new Pope's an American, and everyone was kind of like, what? Because, obviously he's the first Pope from the US.
As a leader in the world, in such a huge religion, influential religion, I think it's really, really important to be open-minded.
His name is Robert Francis Prevost, and he's from Chicago. He took the name Leo. So I think that's a fire Pope name.
Oh my god, I'm so jealous they have an amazing podcast. Well, that needs to push me to do shit like this and actually make our podcast popular and great and all this stuff. And I think that you hit the nail on the head with that. Hello everyone! Welcome back to another episode of Washed Up, where we explain and represent the latest news from a Gen Z perspective so that you don't have to watch the legacy media that your grandparents believed and defended to the bitter end. And as you can see, we are in person. It's our first live show.
Yeah, it's a pretty momentous occasion for us here on Washed Up. First time doing it in person, and for the foreseeable future, we'll probably be doing it this way. Because Abby will be in DC for the summer at least. So yeah. Abby, how have you been liking getting settled in DC so far?
It's been good. I have been here for about 5 days maybe, and everything's been really cool. I think that I used the metro for the first time yesterday, and it is so easy to navigate. I didn't realize how easy it was to navigate. The city's really great. My work has been great. Everything's good right now. I'm having a fun time.
Yeah, it's been exciting because you've been here for several days now, and we got to catch up on Tuesday, and we were gonna maybe record an episode then. We decided not to. We just had a nice evening, got dinner and whatnot. And I'm kind of glad that we didn't record on Tuesday because there's some pretty big news that happened today. Which I'm sure we're going to get into. There's a new pope, so very excited about that. Anything else about DC getting settled that you want to touch on first?
This is my first time living on the East Coast, and the other day Colin and I were actually talking about the differences between East Coast culture and West Coast culture, and I never even really thought about it that much until when during my training in Alicante, all the other Americans were not from the West Coast, and we all kind of talked about how we grew up and how the people on the East Coast felt more inclined to maybe work really hard because they felt there was no other option, versus I do think that there's a lot more leniency on the West Coast. I'm being very general, so I don't want anyone to think that I'm being stereotypical, but at least from what I've seen and what I've experienced.
Yeah, I mean that was sort of my experience too, because when I moved to DC I moved in November, but I started working here August. And so it was a bit of a culture shock coming from San Diego to be here. And I remember when I was interviewing for the job that I have now, I was texting you about it and being everyone is so eager here. Everyone is just wants to please. And it seems it's work, work, work,
Yeah.
which, as we've talked about before, both of us can very much get into that mentality of just work, work, work. And so I appreciate that about the East Coast, like you said, but it's also a bit of a shock if you're coming from the West Coast.
Everyone was asking me what it was like to go to college in San Diego, and they had made this joke, and they were like, oh, do you go surfing in between classes and stuff? And I was people do that though. At
Some
USD,
people do, yeah.
I remember I would see people doing that, and I'd be like, wow, that must be nice, but that's not me. Or that big grass area in front of Camino, I would see people tanning or people chilling out there, or I would see people playing games during our dead hours, and I used to be like, how do you even have any free time during those dead hours, and I was so jealous. So that's not too far from anything, being oh yeah, do you guys go surfing?
Yeah, no, us student journalists have zero chill, and we still don't have any chill.
Truly.
I was chasing down a scoop, or Abby would be at a student government meeting, asking groundbreaking questions that would make the front page.
Yeah, and I also had a different job at the time at USD, so I'd be balancing it, and then I would be going to my other job, And I remember specifically with the Carl, we've talked about this before. With the Carl, it was happening, and I also had a work event, but during the work event, I left my work event. I'm sorry. Sorry to my sustainability team if you're hearing this. Left the work event um for like 15 minutes, went to help out our news editor at the time, then came back, started working again. And that is just like the definition of what I think my USD work experience was like. It was grind, grind, grind all the time, hungry, eager, which we actually had a really good conversation about the other day too, like how much our hunger is beneficial, I guess.
I think so, yeah. And I think that'll serve you very well in DC, and you probably have found it already is. And um, as we both said, we kind of do our best work when we have one too many things that we're juggling. And I think that's true for both of us. We both had a long day at work, and now we're kind of spending the evening doing this episode. But honestly, I don't know. This is what we do it for, I feel like. It's just,
Yeah, I actually can't imagine having a chill work life. Like not to not to be very, very like capitalist America right now, but that genuinely is what makes me me, I think. And I think I could say the same about you. Like when we are very interested and very into our work, we're putting all of ourselves into it. And sometimes that does bleed into our personal lives, which I could say that I am working on more and more.
well, someone who is also exemplifying that to me is Gavin Newsom, because I just keep thinking to myself, how the hell does he have the time? Like, I feel like this is like our part-time, at least part-time job at the moment. And so every time I hear about another episode that he did, I'm like, how does he balance it all? How, you know what I mean? Like, I just keep coming back to that. So,
It's a good idea for him to have a podcast in terms of like letting everybody else get to know him in the scope of not just being left leaning, like he's definitely modernizing himself, but for people like us and for people other people in the media or other people who understand like what goes into something like recording a podcast episode, we're looking at him and we're like, you're wasting your time. Like you as a person who has such an important job and there's probably a million other things you're doing and probably pawning off on other people, like you should be sitting at your desk or you should be going around like campaigning for other things. Like I don't know. That's at least what goes through my mind.
maybe I'm a little bit jealous of him because I'm sure that like he probably has someone to do like the lighting and the audio and the setup and the editing
The
and the
social media.
production and yeah, like there's so much that goes into it that I'm sure like one person who's also running a whole state couldn't also be doing. So it would be nice like envisioning down the line how that might go for us, and I'm maybe a little bit jealous of him.
But can he say that he built his podcast from the ground up? Like, I don't think he can. Like,
No,
I don't think he's as scrappy as we are.
yeah, and I think that that's part of like what makes what we do. Like it's a core, I think. And I feel like no matter how big we try to expand this podcast, it's like we're always going to want to have a hand in all of those things, I think. Or like we're always going to want to use this skill set that we've developed over the course of time, starting first at like the Vista and then now with this, like developing those skills from the ground up, like you said, I think is gonna define our trajectory forward.
And something that I also really want to stay true to is amplifying our generation and also young voices. Like, I imagine when we blow up or like get bigger, when and we're able to have the bandwidth to like hire or do other things, I wouldn't want to hire somebody who is very experienced with many, many work years under their belt, like not struggling to get a job in this economy, stuff like that. I'd want to hire somebody who is within our generation, who is an opinionated person, who's also in Gen Z and everything that we both personally stand for, what our brand stands for, and what we keep on saying, basically.
I feel like a good example of this, we had a mutual friend of ours help us out a little bit with our branding and design some of like the YouTube banners and stuff like that. So first of all, you know who you are. Thank you so much because it really helps and we appreciate it. And they're gonna be the first person who we give back to once we have something to give back.
I know, I literally told her, I was like, once I get paid for this, like, I promise you, you will be getting some money for design, like photos possibly, like stuff like that. But for now it is all very scrappy and we have $0 in our under our belt. So
And now that we're in person, it kind of feels like we're starting all over again because it's a whole new like I don't know. It's different when you're logging on just like from your own computer in an empty room, and that's how we were conducting this
Mhm.
before. And now it's definitely like a change again to be in person. I think it'll be great, and I'm excited about it. But learning new things like the whole setup that we have here
I know, maybe we'll take a photo and
take
like
a bit of thought.
edit it into here of what like the setup, the behind the scenes setup looks like or something like that because
Yeah,
it is definitely scrappy.
it's amusing.
Like this is the definition of scrappy for sure.
Oh man.
Uh,
Are we doing optimistic stories this weekend, or do you want to go straight to the Pope?
do you have an optimistic story? Like I don't have.
No.
Okay,
So I guess that answers
so
that
I guess we're
question.
gonna talk about the vote.
Yeah. So I think it's time for us to talk about the new Pope. You were the one who told me about it. So what was your reaction about it?
So, as I was telling Colin earlier, I've been prepping a lot for my job. So, right now I'm kind of working remotely, but today I actually had the chance to work with some people who I'm going to be working with the whole summer in person. And we're like in this library room, and I'm on Do Not Disturb. I'm so focused on my work. And I turn my Do Not Disturb off for a second, and lo and behold, I get a text from Carissa, our mutual friend, and also she was editor in chief before Colin. She won't mind me saying this, but she texted me and she goes, "New Pope alert," or something like that. She was like, "New Pope alert," and I was like, I literally think I texted you the exact same thing right after that. I had no time to even like research it or anything like that because I was jumping from meeting to meeting in this meeting room, and so I texted you that, and then I turned my phone off
That should
basically.
definitely be the title of this video, New Pope Alert.
There were some interesting headlines actually, some witty ones. Oh gosh, I can't remember it now, but I think that NPR had a good one. I remember when I looked it up, I was like, "Oh wait, these are kind of fire." Like it was like a fun like play on words, and I think that we would have had fun with it if we were in the
I
Vista.
always love the New York Post is hilarious headlines, so I try to kind of bring that to the table, and hopefully maybe we can think of something more creative and fun to title this video. But yeah, no, I had
Yeah,
so
so what was your reaction? Because I bet you have more information. Like mine was very split moment.
well, so I saw your text, and then I was like trying to figure out who it was, but they hadn't actually announced the name yet. They just had like the white smoke go up or whatever, and it's very theatrical, which I find kind of amusing. But so everyone knew they were gonna announce it in like an hour, so we were all waiting around in the office, like refreshing. I had like the news pulled up and was just hitting refresh, and eventually like the name came out. Well, actually, first someone in my office was like, "The new Pope's an American," and everyone was kind of like, "What?" Because obviously he's the first Pope from the U.S. He's was born in Chicago. Um, by the way, his name
Oh
is
yeah, we're gonna.
Robert. His name is Robert Francis Prevost, and he's from Chicago. He took the name Leo.
Leo.
So I think that's a fire Pope name, to be honest. There's been 14 Leos, but I was thinking like, what would I choose as my Pope name? I think Leo would be up there. What would be your Pope name, Abby?
I can't say I've ever thought of it. I did think that Francis was good though. Like I really liked
It
that.
was original. He was the
Yeah,
first
he was
one.
original. I actually really like the name Francis, like in general.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I think that it's cute. Like, Saint Francis. I feel like I know a lot about because that was one of our like partner schools growing up for K through 12 for me. Um, yeah, I think that other reactions I had were like after my work day, like I think we had 2 hours left. So then after that, I actually found out he was American through you because I was leaving the library and I was walking with my two coworkers and I go, guys, the new Pope's American. And they go, like both of them. And one of the people I work with, he's from Spain. And he was like, "What?" He was so confused. It was so funny. But we all talked about it and we are like, okay, well, I guess it doesn't really matter where you're from as long as you have good values and like care about progression for the Catholic Church, or not just even progression, but yeah, like the values that I think the Catholic Church should stand for and not what they claim to stand for. Which, when I was doing research for it too, I saw the New York Times had published an article about him and had said that he had posted about how the Trump admin um, didn't represent the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. I saw that he had kind of gotten into like a back and forth with JD Vance at one point. Like in February, he had like, I don't know, tweeted at JD Vance or something, because JD Vance had said something about like we should love people in this order, like family, country, and then church. I don't know. He had like rank ordered how we should love people or something, and it was like it appealed to like the right in America, but the this guy had tweeted him back saying like we should love all people equally or something like this. So he has a past of taking somewhat politically toned statements and like making them public. So whether or not that speaks to like his politics at all, if he's going to be more left leaning, as some people think that Francis was, is kind of yet to be seen. But he also, so he's from Chicago. I think he went to Villanova, but he lived in Peru for a while.
I saw that, yeah.
So that could be interesting because I think he was a bishop in Peru for like a decade or so.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, that might inform some of his, obviously, his worldview or like his beliefs about things. And I would say Latin America tends to lean this is just my brief experience of it. I feel like it tends to lean a bit more left and progressive. Like they're very open-minded.
Like
there.
the people there.
Yeah, I would say.
I would say that too, and I also think it's probably because of the government, like people pushing back at certain things, stuff like that. But anyways, continue going.
Well, no, I just think like that might inform his worldview a bit, and maybe if depending on if he was in a more impoverished area or not, he might have some background experience like ministering to people similar to how Francis did. So yeah, I mean that kind of sums it up for what I have right now. But I was gonna ask you, you kind of alluded, what are some qualities in a pope that you want or like that you would like to see?
I would like to see a pope who doesn't just say things for the sake of saying things politically, which this is in a dream world. So, like, obviously, choosing the pope is very political. Like, it's a huge, like, the Catholic Church is such a huge religion, and they have its own hierarchy and history within it. I mean, the Vatican is its own like country.
And over 1 billion Catholics too.
Yeah, and I would like to see a pope who preaches what they stand for in terms of the things that they actually do in their philanthropy and in what they're actually doing. I hate when political figures, celebrities, like whatever, kind of don't practice what they preach. But yeah, like I think that that would be a really big step for the Pope. I think that it's only natural to be more progressive, I guess, because it's 2025. Like you again, like I agree that you should be loving everybody. Like that is such a foundation, basic foundation of what I believe is what being a Catholic is supposed to be about. Like if you look at Jesus's teachings, if you read the Bible, all this stuff, like my friend and I actually read the Bible like front to back, like as like a little project, not even like for religious purposes, just for like educational purposes. And I've read the Bible so many times, like passages and passages, because I've grown up going to Catholic school. But I hate when people interpret things like what is supposed to bring people together as a way to treat it as a weapon against others. And I don't want a pope who's like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as you were saying that, I feel like people forget or it gets kind of lost that like Jesus would hang out with literally the most ostracized people. Everyone hated the tax collectors because they would come around and collect people's taxes and they tended to like skim off the top and it was just a corrupt system. But he would actively like seek out tax collectors to make his disciples. And also the same with like ill people and lepers and blind people, and these people would be treated like outcasts in that society because they were seen as like having done something wrong or bad, and they were cast out. But Jesus was all about like, how do we bring these people back into the fold, and not just that, but like put them in some of the highest positions in his inner circle. So I totally agree. Like, I think if someone is going to embody what Catholicism is all about, they should be doing the same. And all the people who maybe feel like they've been ostracized by Catholics or don't feel like they have a place in Catholicism, I think are the people who the Pope could have the most influence on and make the most positive change with.
I totally agree with that. I think that Catholicism could be much better than it is now, especially in America in 2025. Like, I hate seeing it being weaponized. Maybe it's because of my connection to Catholicism. I wouldn't say that I'm an intense Catholic now, but I think that because I grew up in it, like, I will forever have a connection to Catholicism in one way or another. What about you? I know that you also grew up Catholic.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think that all world religions are helpful because they kind of give people direction, and they kind of give them a model of the world that has been very carefully crafted and like formulated over thousands of years oftentimes. And so I think a lot of times growing up in a religion will serve someone a lot better than just being like directionless or growing up without faith of any kind. So I certainly feel like that's the case for me. I feel like it provided me with a good blueprint of the world that allowed me to navigate it more effectively, and I'm really grateful for that. But then I've also, like, as I get older, I see different ways where the it doesn't quite map onto like my experience of the world, and so those are areas where I have to kind of form my own opinions, and maybe the doctrine of the church hasn't quite expanded to encompass all of that. Maybe it still could, I don't really know, but I think it's valuable. I think all world religions have a lot of value. And when I was in high school, I mean, I grew up very Catholic. Still consider myself Catholic, but I kind of was, you know, the book Life of Pi, where the main character is like tries out all the different faiths. I feel like that was kind of my experience, where I really like dabbled in each one a
I
bit,
could see you doing that.
and like wanted to pull out or extract like what is the essential message of all of them.
Right.
So that was an effective, or that was a transformative thing for me.
Yeah, I think it's super important to be open-minded. That's another thing that I would like in a pope.
Mm.
As a leader in the world in such a huge religion, influential religion, I think it's really, really important to be open-minded. That's also why I liked, even though he's American, I liked how much, I guess, time he spent outside of America. I think that for everyone that it's really valuable if you have the means to, and if you have the capacity to. I always say, like, why not?
Yeah.
Because it does give you this perspective and open-mindedness that I don't think you get if you stay in your hometown your entire life.
Yeah, and it's interesting how the world that we're living in is evolving so quickly in terms of technology and like our ability to travel different places easily, that like nowadays your average person is able to have that experience of getting outside of their bubble and like seeing the rest of the world. And I think Gen Z has really been shaped by that because we've had that from the time that we were young. We've always grown up with the internet. Travel is relatively easy these days, so we as Gen Z have been able to grow up in that world, and hopefully our leadership will also be open to that and embrace that too.
I'm really interested to see, like, what really right-winged conservative politicians are gonna say about the new American Pope. Like, when I first heard that he was American, that was kind of my first thought. I was like, holy crap, like, they're gonna they're gonna love this. But then, like, I read the background about, like, what you were saying, like JD Vance, Tiff, and like how he's spoken out against a couple of things like that. And I'm really curious how to see reactions when it comes to that.
Yeah, that's interesting because I mean I think everyone's been kind of congratulatory so far, like celebratory. But I think
Is Trump gonna try to hold his hand?
yeah, exactly. That was iconic with Pope Francis. But I think Trump put out like a positive statement.
Okay.
Like open. He was like, "This is a good thing for America. Like, I look forward to meeting him." I think that was the kind of tone. It was funny though because during the conclave when they're selecting the Pope, there was a meme going around of AI generated Trump as the Pope, and it was kind of. I mean, it was a joke. Like, there's a lot of things Trump do where it's like, is he joking or not joking? This one was definitely a joke, and he even said so. Like when a reporter asked him directly, he was like, "Come on, like this is ridiculous. It's obviously a joke." And so I actually, I don't know. I find it funny when Trump is like acknowledging that he's joking, but less funny when he's kind of like subtly, again, engaging in that strategic ambiguity that we always talk about. Um, but yeah, I mean, it is objectively funny to think of Trump as the Pope, and that was never going to happen. He obviously is very content with where he is right now.
Yeah, that'd be crazy.
It reminded me of there's like this Grimm's fairy tale about the fisherman, the old man and the fish or something. And basically he just like goes and makes a wish to a fish and like keeps asking for more and more and more. He's like, I want to be king, I want to be pope, and then like eventually the fish like takes back all the wishes because he's gone too far. And I was like, that's so Trump. He just like he wants to be the reality TV star. He wants to be the president. Now he wants to be the pope. Like when does he overstep himself and then it all comes crumbling?
Right.
But obviously, I also am like taking the joke here. It's not as serious as some people were trying to make it.
And there are much, much bigger things to criticize than Trump's like humor, quote unquote humor. Especially when he says it's a joke. Like trust. If you've watched or listened to any of our other episodes, you can hear just a couple of criticisms of him.
I think since our last episode, he's passed his 100th day in office, which sounds like a lot, but when you think about it, I'm like, how much longer do we have? Like, how many months? So if he's
Under his presidency?
well, yeah, like
That's funny.
so let me think. It's been like 4
I can't do
months.
quick math like that right
It's
now.
been 4 months, so it's like a third of a year. He has 4 years, so it's like a twelfth of his presidency. So all we have is that times 11, and then we'll be done.
Ah, yes, he's gotten through almost a semester's worth in
But
presidency.
Trump also, he recently did an interview where he kind of shot down the idea that he would seek a third term. So I also found that positive. Like when he was able to be candid, like, look, guys, it's a joke. I don't want to be the Pope. I appreciated that. When he was able to be candid and be like, look, guys, I'm not going to run for a third term. I appreciate that. Like, I just think that's sort of, I can appreciate humor. I can take a joke, but from your top leadership running the free world, I just want a little bit of like candidness sometimes.
Yeah, it's just funny because I've never heard of a president needing to be like, I will not run for a third term. Like,
So I'm hoping maybe our Pope will be candid as well, but also know how to take a joke.
yeah, I hate to say that I don't think a lot of Catholicism in the Catholic Church is synonymous with being
Transparency.
candid. Yeah. Which is like kind of where my hesitancy and completely aligning myself with the Catholic Church comes from. Like I believe in higher power, believe in God, but yeah, it's really hard for me to, after knowing so much, kind of dive into the beast. But I'm hoping for the best with this new pope.
Yeah, and have you? So I've been hearing more and more about Pope Francis in the aftermath of him passing and then them selecting the new Pope. Have you heard any new updates about Francis that you find interesting? Like, I heard that he had donated the Pope Mobile to people in Gaza.
Oh, I did not hear that. That's cool.
It was interesting, but I was kind of like, what are they gonna do with that?
Yeah, I was literally about to say like, but
well,
like, what are they gonna do?
I also heard that like the Pope Francis had been like communicating a lot with religious leaders in Gaza during the whole war, and he was trying to kind of inspire them to like maintain faith and solidarity amongst themselves and just stay strong in the face of war. So I don't know. I thought that was somewhat inspirational and spoke to a bit of like what people liked about Francis, and it feels like they moved on quite quickly from him passing. Like it's
Well, what does it have to be? How many days is it again? 55.
I think it's like
Sorry.
10 to 15 days until they could
Okay,
launch the conclave.
55 is way too much that I just said.
Yeah.
I was just thinking the number 5 because I remember. Yeah, okay, yeah,
But
you're
we're on
right.
the second day of the conclave, and so that's kind of on par with how the other ones have gone in the past. They've been kind of quick, like couple of days. But yeah, I don't know. We were only, I don't know, 15 or so days post Francis. So
I'm sure that they were also really preparing too because they all knew he was
that's
sick,
true. Yeah.
and yeah, they definitely probably wanted to choose a pope as fast as possible and get all these things done. So I could imagine like back channeling like whispers of contenders and whatnot.
Okay.
Anything else you want to talk about for in terms of the pope?
No, I think we're gonna find out a lot more about him shortly. I mean, so I went to his Wikipedia page and someone had like just updated it that he was the new pope, and so it was very like sloppily edited, his Wikipedia page, and you couldn't really glean much out of it.
Mhm.
But I think we covered what's so far been available about
Yeah.
him.
Wow, I'm very glad we waited to record now.
Yeah.
Big news.
Okay. So currently, there's a lot going on as usual. Mostly focusing though on Iran because they're sort of renegotiating the Iran nuclear deal, which was made under Obama, and essentially it was a JCPOA. I kind of forget what that stands for. It's known as the Iran nuclear deal, where they had basically the U.S. was giving Iran a lot of money to kind of limit the scope of their development of nuclear capacity, and they were limited to like only enriching so much uranium or only using it for like energy purposes, not military. And so now Trump has come in and he wants to renegotiate the terms of the JCPOA. And there's a very different like landscape in the Middle East now because we've had October 7th, we've had Iran like backing all of the proxies who were attacking Israel, including the Houthis. And the Houthis, we just made a like ceasefire deal with them apparently,
Right.
where they've been attacking our shipping, we've been firing back at them, and now they've agreed to stop doing that temporarily. And we said like, okay, well, then we'll go easy on you now. But Iran has kind of had its like hand in these other proxies who have been attacking Israel. So Israel wants Iran like, well, there's competing interests, but Israel doesn't want Iran to have nuclear capacity at all. And some people are saying, including Trump, like, well, we might be open to them having nuclear capability, but limiting the scope of it. And as long as we can get them to agree to that, like, that'll be good enough. So, yeah, have you have you heard anything about this or have any thoughts?
I have not heard as much as I'd like to. I have read like a couple headlines. Like honestly, I'll be honest. Like on the way here, I've been having a very hectic time recently. But um, like always, my thoughts are always, oh, what is Trump like? What is Trump's strategy here? Like, what is maybe not being said and stuff like that. Like I always feel like I always go to again like our a big theme of ours is what what is the messaging between the messaging.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where my mind was here initially. What about you? I know
Well,
that
you're
you.
definitely not alone in that because a lot of people have kind of compared trying to understand Iran to like reading tea leaves. Like it's very esoteric. And I think that Iran feels the exact same way about Trump. They see him as very volatile because Trump is like the kind of leader who will like openly be very open to like, let's make a deal. But then he'll like take out their top general with an airstrike. And then it's like, like, how do you square that? Because on the one hand, he seems very conciliatory and like, you know, wants to have the best deal that he can and like be very peace loving. But then when push comes to shove, like if he's provoked, he'll kind of like snap back at you. So Iran is having a hard time, I think, understanding Trump. But I think by the second term, they're kind of like they kind of get him a little bit better. So I think there's less risk of escalation on that grounds because they've had time to kind of see his style and see his long-term vision. And I think Trump has had time to figure those things out, whereas his first term, he was just kind of experimenting. So I'm actually optimistic they could reach a deal. I was at an event on Monday with some Middle East policy experts, and that was what they had said. And they also seemed fairly optimistic that they would reach a new deal to replace the JCPOA. It might be almost the exact same deal as the JCPOA, but they were like, you can bet that Trump is going to say it's a way better
It's
deal.
a way better deal, and he came up with it all on his own, stuff like that. I actually just did like a whole day of training on negotiating, and we were doing really big examples like with different countries, but we were also doing like smaller vendors and things like that. And it's always the same in a negotiation. Like the best negotiations are ones where you give a little and you take a little. And so each nation in this case would be a win-win scenario. What do you think the ideal win-win scenario would be?
With Iran, that's a tough one. They have a certain amount of uranium stockpile that they've been enriching, and they don't want to get rid of all of that because I think that that takes a lot of like time and energy to do that. I don't know how enriching uranium works, but
Yeah,
I've heard it. That's what I've heard. And so they don't want to get rid of their stockpile. Some who are like hawks in the U.S. are like, you gotta get rid of all of it. They can have no uranium, no enriching, no nuclear capacity at all. But again, I said some people are more open to like let them develop nuclear capacity as long as it's not being weaponized for like nukes or military. And apparently, U.S. intelligence hasn't found evidence that Iran is trying to develop nuclear weapons. So I think an ideal situation or negotiation would allow Iran to keep some of their stockpile, keep enriching for energy purposes, but under the agreement that they wouldn't make weapons out of it, which again is literally what the JCPOA was.
Right, the same exact deal. So the deal that is replacing this deal will be probably very similar.
Yeah, probably so.
Okay.
But what you're saying about negotiations, I want to hear more about that. But I also
oh my gosh, yeah, it was actually crazy.
But it reminded me of Ukraine.
Yeah, I was actually gonna bring that one up too. Okay, you go.
But I was going to say that it reminds me of when Trump was asking for the mineral rights in Ukraine, and we were like, why is he doing that? He's just trying to exploit like a war-torn country where hundreds of thousands of people are dead, and exploit that situation for like the U.S.'s gain, and that seemed really gross. But then we had discussed how maybe this is a play where he's making the biggest ask possible.
So that the other countries.
Yeah, or like the other countries will accept a lesser agreement and be happy and content with it. And wouldn't you know it, well, apparently we got mineral rights in Ukraine, so they're still trying to negotiate peace between Ukraine and Russia. And apparently JD Vance said at a Munich security conference that basically Russia was asking too much and we weren't willing to concede to them. That's why there hasn't been a peace deal. But we did get minerals from Ukraine.
Thank God. Yeah. I'm just kidding.
God bless.
Yeah, yeah.
But about negotiating, so you also took a class on negotiating in college. What sort of like insights did you get?
From the class itself, if for somehow this professor is listening to this, thank you so much for this class, because I did not believe you a year ago that class would have helped me so much in my life today. I actually use it very, very frequently, especially in speaking to my coworkers and in interviews and stuff like that. And now in the nature of my job, I'm supposed to be also trying to get really good deals for the students, and that involves negotiating and talking to a lot of vendors and stuff like that. And because of that, our company actually hired a like professional in negotiating. She like worked for CIA and stuff like that in Spain. She's Spanish. And so she came and she was giving us, it was genuinely like a 4-hour class on negotiating. Like we were outside, we like did a bunch of debates, stuff like that. And then we did workshops in classrooms. And it was definitely really intense. Like, it was a lot of n- negotiating. Like, I can't think of another word right now. But it was a lot of it being in the scope of maybe making deals with restaurants, more so in Europe, I would want to say, because in my company, like, DC is only one of two of the cities in America. So I think that it was applied more to the broader cities in Europe, which I think would work better because I feel like in America it's harder to maybe barter a bit, but I do think it's possible to do here, especially when you're giving somebody consistent customers
Do you
and
have
stuff.
any tips for like our audience that they could apply on how to be good at negotiating? And maybe these might be related to foreign policy or not, but anything like that?
The thing that I took away the most, which I have to learn at because this is not something I'm good at, especially if you know me, is the less you say, the better. The less you say, the more the person is going to be willing to share
Mm.
because people are naturally afraid of silence. So, an example that this woman had given us was she was talking about negotiating with your roommate or something like that. And she brought up the problem that the roommate had, and she just sat there and she's like, "So, what do you think?" And it was genuinely like 10 seconds of silence, and the other person ended up talking and doing all this stuff. And I actually think a better example was when she just walked into the room and was trying to, it's called like information gather and information extract information. And she went up to a random person like in our cohort, and she ended up getting a lot of information because this girl just kept talking because she was just staring at her. She just sat across from her and she was like, because I mean, like, what do you expect when somebody's silent, and especially if it's a new person? I have yet to practice it as much, but I think that that could be a very, very useful tool. And it's the same even in interviews. Like,
Yeah, I
you
was just about to
should
say that too. Yeah.
say less. It's okay to be silent. It's okay to do a pause, which I also have a lot of trouble with.
No, they well, so in the like limited interviewing experience training that I've had, they do say that like if you ask someone a really probing or intense question, just wait like 3 seconds, and that's usually enough. So say you ask someone like, "Did you do this, this, this?" And then they'll like give their like blanket statement to you, and then you just like sit there and you're like
You nod.
for like 3 seconds, and then they'll feel compelled to like fill the gap and say more, and then that's when you can sometimes get your best content. And like that from interviewing, I'm
Right.
sure.
In journalism,
Like
yeah.
the stuff that you get that are just the throwaway lines from people when they're just kind of like filling the space is sometimes the leading quote that you end up using.
An example that actually comes to mind for this, do you know what I'm gonna say? Um,
No, I have some guesses, but you go.
is a story that I wrote when I was news editor, and it was about our auxiliary services. And I had interviewed somebody higher up in that department. I literally went to her office. I was like sitting there, and I used a lot of these probing skills, what Colin was just talking about, where I was kind of asking very blunt to the point questions. And it could have been just a yes or no sometimes. And even if it was, I kind of was like, I would just sit there and nod. And this person was not very good with silence, which, granted, like, I'm not either. And I don't think that this person has many experience in interviewing, I don't think, or in information gathering in the way that we did, learned, especially during that time I was in our advisor's class where we learned a lot about that as well.
Mhm.
And she gave me so much more information than I even thought. But we actually ended up using that as like a pull quote because we were like, holy shit, this is insane. I can't believe she admitted that. It
Mhm.
was insane. I remember thinking like, wow, I really did that. Like that was one of my, I think, proudest interview probing moments in our little community.
Yeah, no, I think it has many applications, like the power of silence. And I don't know that Trump practices the power of silence in
Yeah.
negotiation, but he definitely practices the power of like ambiguity.
Right.
And he won't like he trying to avoid like very definitive stances on things. or he'll kind of like play to both sides, or do something really extreme and then the opposite extreme right after the fact. And like all of that is to kind of, I think, create some confusion, some tension, where other people feel the pressure to then make the first move or the next move. And so I don't know, it's interesting the ways that certain people approach these very high level like negotiating and strategy. And I think Trump is pretty effective at it overall in foreign policy.
I
Like,
mean, he's a businessman at the end of the day. Like, I'm
yeah,
sure he uses the skills he used in his background previously to
the art of the deal. I'm
exactly
sure that
that.
book was ghostwritten, but still.
Exactly that. Like, and that was another thing. Like, ambiguity and vagueness was also another, I guess, tip that I was given in terms of you're not supposed to reveal any of those numbers of like what you're trying to do, but you are supposed to reveal your goal in a really good negotiation. Like, hey,
Yeah.
like my goal, maybe not the exact numbers, but like all good negotiations, I'm gonna walk in and be like, hey, my goal is to have a summer where I bring my students here and eat here. And that's enough to spark a good negotiation. And in these, you even see like we know what everyone's goal, quote unquote, for the most part is, unless there's like hidden agendas. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's when negotiations go wrong. I'm thinking of there's a historical example when Reagan and Gorbachev were trying to negotiate the end of the Cold War, and they had had like this whole summit, and it was very like, amenable, and everyone was happy with it. And then there's this line in Reagan's autobiography where he's like, and then Gorbachev turned to me and he said, of course, all of this is contingent on dismantling the Star Wars program, which the US was trying to have like essentially the Iron Dome where we could like shoot down incoming missiles. And then Reagan was like stormed out of there. He's like, no way, that's such a part of our like what we're all about, and that's a huge strategic goal. We're not going to abandon that. Summit ended, no one got anywhere. So like, yeah, if you're not upfront about goals, you can have some ambiguity, some you don't want to show up and give exactly what you're trying to get out of it because then you'll end up getting less, but you can approach it. You should at least have your goals stated and clear, communicated, everyone's on the same page so that you have a foundation to make a deal.
Exactly. And you can't have a win-win negotiation if the both parties don't know what you want.
Yeah.
And that ends up with a lot of miscommunication for the most part.
So I guess again in Ukraine and with Russia, he said that he would end the Ukraine war on day one of his presidency, which obviously didn't happen. We're
Past
post 100
100.
days now, but still, I remain kind of optimistic we're on a good path here, but it's just dragged on more and more and more. So hopefully we can reach a deal with them. And what do you think about how Vance and Rubio have kind of taken center stage in Trump's administration, especially like the foreign policy aspect of it?
I think it's even more interesting post Jeffrey Goldberg gate.
Signal gate.
Signal gate, yeah. I think that's really interesting, especially having had eyes in their chat and getting that information that you obviously don't usually get. Um, I think that it might be better that Trump isn't the main point of contact. Not that I think that Vance is the best point of contact either when it comes to the foreign affairs, but I think it is a good idea to delegate certain responsibilities to somebody who isn't Trump. Not that I'm a big fan of Vance either, but do you have any specific opinions about this?
Well, I mean, they've kind of brought up Vance is obviously like the heir apparent to the Republican nomination after Trump. Now that Trump has said he won't seek a third term,
Right.
knock on wood.
Needed that confirmation.
But so Vance is kind of the heir apparent. I think he's very smart. I think when I listen to him, I don't always agree, like as a rule, but I do think he's very thoughtful about things. I think he's like got all the credentials and all of the background and all the everything you would want from a vice president and a president. Um, so Yeah, I mean, I genuinely don't have many problems with Vance. I remember when he was like running for VP, he had made some comments that made people mad, especially about like cat ladies and whatnot. I feel like he's really moved on from that, kind of turned a page, and
From
well,
the cat ladies.
well, kind of. There's still a very like lively meme culture around Vance. I don't know if you've seen, but I see like Vance edits all the time where it's like they edit him to look really distorted,
Uh-huh.
and a lot of people are saying like I don't even remember what he looks like at this point. Like,
Well, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like picturing him, and I actually have seen all those memes. And when you mention something like that, it only just goes in like the memes go straight into my
I actually
mind.
have his memoir right here. It's been on my bookshelf. I haven't read it. Sorry.
So I don't know. I maybe it's because you put it in my mind, but I'm like, now why am I having trouble picturing what this man looks like?
Yeah, but Rubio, as Secretary of State,
Yeah, Rubio
has
too.
really like I think stepped up. He's running like all these different agencies right now because USAID it got
Right.
put under the State Department, and so he's running the State Department, USAID. I think at least one other that I'm forgetting. Um, so he's really taken on a lot of responsibility, and people are looking to him as like he could also be a contender in 28. I liked Rubio when he ran in 2016. So if he did make a run in 4 years from now, I I could see myself supporting him.
And we'll have to see what he does in the next 4 years too.
He's been really hawkish, and I'm not about that, but
Right.
just in general, he seems like a very level-headed, like reasonable, intelligent person,
Right.
which is better than we've had in the
And we
past.
haven't really had a reasonable, level-headed, intelligent person on this. I think you mentioning USAID really made me think about how now that I'm in DC, I really do see the impact of the federal cuts. I feel like I mean, I've only been here for 4 days, but I feel like I've met a good amount of people in passing and in me on the lookout for friends and trying to meet people in my community who are either in between jobs or are on the job hunt. And I think that's another interesting aspect of being in DC. Like, we've been discussing it, like federal cuts and people losing their jobs, and how Trump said that he would promise all these jobs to people, and all of a sudden, everyone in the nation's capital are in between jobs looking for new things and kind of feeling a little bit of loss there. So, sorry, that was a little bit off topic, but
No, no,
that
no.
like really triggered something in me, and I was like, oh, I did want to talk about that difference, I guess, and seeing that more up close.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting, and also kind of brings us to the Pentagon, which there was a headline that like Hegseth is planning to fire 20% of
Mhm.
generals, and so it kind of speaks to that too. Like at every single level of government, no matter how long people have been in their role or department or whatever, they're kind of on the chopping block, and no one has really been safe from it. Um, People have pointed out like, well, Trump came in saying he was going to be super pro-veteran, and then how is now like downsizing all these generals really pro-veteran? But yeah, so they're cutting down the leadership just because I think they're frustrated at the Pentagon with how oversized the bureaucracy there is, and um, the way that that leads to like ineffectiveness in terms of like executing missions and various other administrative things.
Yeah, I hear that, especially in DC right now. I mean, it only makes sense, but I hear that people's like in the city, the jobs are just so competitive because everyone lost their jobs and they're all like looking for the same things. So I can't even imagine for like high level positions, like where do you even go from there if they're just fully being eliminated? Okay, it is time for Bury the Lead, which is self-imposed this week because we didn't realize that it's a 45-minute timer. Anyways, we will have 2.5 minutes each to deliver our hottest takes. And this week, Colin, you should go first because I need to
Okay.
gather my thoughts for a second.
Okay. So this week I'm going to be talking about jealousy and how I think that jealousy can actually be a very positive thing. I think there's a lot of like emotions in society that we're kind of trained to push away because they're not really comfortable or they can cause problems in our relationships. And like envy, jealousy are it's literally one of the seven deadly sins, right? Envy, pretty sure.
Yeah, it's like envy, gluttony. Yeah,
Yeah.
envy,
So
you're right.
it's like it's or avarice, I'm not sure. But it's like one of the seven deadly sins, really, really bad. You shouldn't be jealous. But I find like when we kind of make or disallow certain feelings or emotions, then they end up just finding like backdoor ways of getting in and into our lives anyway. And so I like think we should embrace jealousy. If you feel jealous of someone, that can be a really powerful indicator of like what do I actually want and what does this person have or represent to me that I feel like I don't have? And then that can be such a strong motivator to actually go out and get it. And so I think, this can apply to a lot of things, certainly like all the things that society holds up as like the ideal that we should all be striving for. But even just in a very, very personal, visceral level, like I think if we have people around us who we have this like frustration or jealousy about, um, thinking about why it is that we don't think we can also have that can just be a really good self-reflection that can free us up from, I don't know, like feeling like we're limited somehow or that we're lacking somehow. I'm trying to think of some personal examples of this, but I don't. I didn't self-identify as someone who was particularly jealous until probably like sophomore year at USD, University of San Diego, where we went to school, because it's a bit of a wealthier school, and I would say people there. We talked about this opening actually. Like there was sort of like an ease that people had about their lives there, and I was jealous of that because I was like, I feel like I'm always in like go 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 mode. Why can't I also have that they have this like ease about them? And I kind of felt like some of it was motivated by financial things that they had that I felt like I didn't have, but it really made me kind of self-reflect and find different ways that I could try to integrate ease into my life. And now that I've been doing that for a while, I think it has actually benefited me.
That is a really good point, and I can't wait to talk about it after this. But okay, it's time for my Bear the Lead, which, interestingly enough, I'm going to talk about why a 9 to 5 is beneficial for you, which might sound kind of crazy because I feel like maybe I've said a little nugget here and there about like a 9 to 5 being mentally draining. But I do not think anybody has the right to speak up on a 9 to 5 unless you've actually done one. There's something that I hate that influencers and celebrities do sometimes when they say, I could never sit at a desk job all day. Like, babe, you'll never have to. Like, you're saying that, and one, I hate when people do that and put down their job. I feel like the only job in the world that can be put down is influencers and celebrities. Not saying that they don't have their hardships and not saying that I don't keep up with them because that would be hypocritical of me, but I think that every young professional, especially, can benefit from having a 9 to 5 and having that office interaction job. I think that something that happened right when I graduated was I jumped the gun and I really wanted to be remote right away. And I was like, I need a remote job. I need a remote job so I could travel. And I'm so thankful for it. However, I do think that my mother was right in saying, like, as a young professional, you need to know what it's like to interact with adults. You need to know what it's like to not just be in college. Like, you can't have a remote job for the rest of your life because you'll never know what that truly is like. And even though it's been different since after COVID, like, I don't know what it's like before COVID and people being in 9 to 5 all the time, which to me that sounds absolutely exhausting, not having one day off in terms of having a remote day. But I can see why that's good. You're with adults all the time and you're not having the freedom of you have in college of when you have a disagreement with somebody, you can kind of be a jerk if you want to. Not saying that I ever did that, but like you can be a bitch if you want to versus in the work life, in the work environment, you have to kind of figure out how to deal with this in a very adult and communicative way for the most part. And I think that that goes that skill can bleed into everyday life, and that's not just the only skill. There's so many other ones, but yeah, I think that a 9 to 5 can be beneficial for you, and that doesn't take away from the fact that it's also mentally draining.
Amazing.
New one. We are back from our Bear the Lead. I think I liked both of our rants. Colin, yours about jealousy. I also can admit that I'm a jealous person. And I think it's a really good thing to view it as motivation rather than a deadly sin. Like, I think that was a really good idea. I think that Mel Robbins has a very similar take where she says that there's two types of jealousy. One where you're like jealous about things that are like unchangeable. So like
Hmm.
if I'm looking at someone, I'm like, oh, I wish I had blue eyes. But like that's not changeable, so why am I wasting my time being jealous about it? Versus if I'm looking at somebody and I'm like, oh my god, I'm so jealous they have an amazing podcast. Well, that needs to push me to like do shit like this and like actually make our podcast like
Yeah.
popular and great and all this stuff. And I think that you hit the nail on the head with that.
Yeah.
Anyways.
No, I certainly resonated a lot with a lot of what you said about corporate life, and we've kind of been joking as we've sort of entered into that world, the different like peculiarities that you encounter, the different acronyms that are quite amusing. One of my colleagues like hates acronyms, and so that's something we joke about, like the like EOD, COB, like I don't know, just all this like corporate speak that sometimes can be a little bit like jargony, but. I wouldn't have met my coworker who hates acronyms unless I was in the corporate world. So
Exactly.
there you go.
Yeah, so I think that we're just gonna talk a little bit about the Met Gala,
Hmm.
but not the theme like critiquing specific people or anything like that. Like that's been done a million times by now. It's currently Thursday and I think the Met happened what, like on Monday.
Hmm.
So we do not need to do that. But Colin and I have had an interesting conversation about more so the structure and like idea of like the Met itself. Um, Personally, I am somebody who I love when the Met comes around. I like looking at who who's dressed in what. I like looking at the outfits. I like looking at the celebrities who are invited. I like looking at the celebrities who were even left out. Like I like the commentary. And if I had the chance to go to the Met, I would 100% take it. However, I also find myself thinking that I'm being very hypocritical because even earlier in this episode, I had said something about how I don't like when people don't practice what they preach. So me saying that and then having critiqued all these celebrities and like how much money the Met actually makes and what it is, it's an exuberant amount of money. Like it really is capital-esque if you're a Hunger Games fan. Like that's the most capital-esque event that I can think of in our society. Like I can't
Hmm.
like they like the costumes, like everything, the fashion, but I can't help but say that I enjoy the Met. And I was telling Colin, I'm like, am I being hypocritical? Like, am I like not following the same rules that I seem to be preaching at like influencers and celebrities who sometimes I'm extra critical of, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting tension there because I mean, I think both of us agree that we're not really into like the extravagance and over the top and like waste. I don't like I think neither of us like when to see things go to waste or people being wasteful. Like I know you're all about sustainability and like in many different ways, economically, environmentally, and so I think that's part of like the aversion that each of us has when we see like these very upper echelon events. But then at the same time, it's like it would be like I think each of us would go to cover it if that was our job. Like if we were writing like a culture article on it. We've done that before at the Vista. We would often cover the Met when it came around, as well as like the Oscars, the Grammys, Coachella, which you talked about. Even though these sort of events are more geared toward like the wealthy and kind of perpetuating the even the idea of like wealth as wealthy people as a class and um, so anyway, I think it's interesting how we are simultaneously critical of it and have reasons to be averse to it, but then also there's a bit of an appeal that like is kind of undeniable from a cultural standpoint and the power of it.
Mm-hmm. Like I like I said, like if I had the chance to go to the Met, I would. But yeah, I think that the tension that you were talking about and what I was just talking about is something that I find myself plaguing my mind a lot. Like especially with this podcast, like we're putting out our opinions every week, like we're talking very openly, and sometimes I'm very aware of something I said in the past, and then I'm finding myself contradicting myself, and I get like very self conscious, I guess, because I imagine if we were bigger, I literally see it right now. Like somebody making a compilation of me saying one thing and then the next thing is another clip and then somebody being like, yeah, she actually has no idea what she's talking about, she's fake, like all this stuff. And like Colin and I talked about a little bit about like what we would do if we were bigger. And for me, I think that I'm afraid of like that perception of me, I guess. But another thing that he had said to me during the break was, oh, I think that it's good that you're and we are admitting like a bit of hypocrisy or a lot of hypocrisy because people appreciate transparency even in hypocritical moments. Like I don't think that my affinity to I wouldn't say affinity, that's really strong. My want to like be at the Met to cover it or to see the clothes in person and stuff like that is something crazy. Like I don't think that's crazy, but I could also admit like yeah, this is a very very extreme event of I guess waste and like just extreme wealth. Like all these people getting together and claiming that they are philanthropists and like people who like you like all these people too very much line themselves with the left for the most part and they're talking a lot about like maybe environmental issues and like all this stuff but then they're doing all this and maybe I also am not any better than that.
Well, your point about hypocrisy, it kind of, I feel like it's similar to what I've said in the Bury the Lead segment about jealousy, where like I think it's only really problematic when people deny that they are hypocritical or like they deny that they are jealous. And like when you disallow yourself from acknowledging those things about yourself, that's when it really causes problems. But as long as you're able to be like true and see like your own capacity to be hypocritical at times, and I don't even think that this example is really that like big of hypocrisy because I don't know. It's a nuanced one, but um, I and I'm not saying that you're hypocritical. I am also agreeing with you that I feel this like weird tension about the Met too, and I just think like as long as we're like willing to own up to our ability to be hypocritical, then we shouldn't like become trapped in it per se.
Totally. I think we're on the same page when it comes to that. um I'm wondering too if that's a generational thing. So Gen Zers, please comment if you think that you're more critical than of the Met and events like this than maybe your parents or grandparents are. Because like if I brought this up to my mom, for example, I don't even think any of this would cross her mind. Like she also is like somebody who would like probably keep up with like Met or the Grammys or Oscars and be like, wow, this is amazing, and not kind of think about any of those other implications. And not because she's not interested, but more so in like a it doesn't even cross her mind thing. And I think that has to do with Gen Z holding celebrities and influencers and that sort of trope of people more accountable. Like I think did one of us do a bury the lead or did we rant about how we felt like celebrities are falling off or did I just like listen to that
No,
somewhere or was that just a conversation we
I
had
I
like
think that you did, yeah, because you had talked about
oh
Chappell
like
Roan
Chapel
too,
Roan, yeah.
and yeah, I
And
think
that's another thing I was probably a little hypocritical of because I still listen to her music. Like like you know what I'm saying? Like it's just it's interesting. It really is.
yeah, I think as usual, what we like to say is like the more nuanced, the better, and I think we're very committed on Washed Up to exploring all of those different layers of nuance and how multiple things can be true at the same time.
Yeah. I think I'm done for the week.
Yeah,
What
me
about you?
too.
Okay.
Washed
Washed up
Up
out.
out. Peace.